Analyst calls Aaron Rodgers too old. His response at forensic conference shuts him down. Aaron Rodgers had faced criticism throughout his career, but this time it was different. He was not on a football field, and he was not talking to sports analysts. He was attending the American Academy of Forensic Sciences conference, where he had been invited to speak about mental resilience, leadership, and handling pressure under extreme conditions. As he stepped onto the stage, the audience clapped, excited to hear from a legend. But then, a voice cut through the applause. "With all due respect, why is Aaron Rodgers even here?" The room fell silent. The question had come from Jason Miller, a well-known sports analyst who had been vocal about Rodgers in the past. Miller smirked. "I mean, let us be honest here. He is too old for the NFL now. He should be retired, not giving speeches about success." Some in the audience chuckled uncomfortably. Others exchanged awkward glances. Rodgers, however, did not react right away. Instead, he took a slow breath and nodded. "That is a fair question," he said, his voice calm. "But tell me, Jason, what exactly makes someone too old?" Miller raised an eyebrow. "Well, I mean, you are, 40? Athletes peak in their 20s. Your best years are behind you," Rodgers smiled. "And yet, I am still standing here." Miller opened his mouth to respond, but Rodgers raised a hand. "Before you say another word, let me ask you something," Rodgers said, leaning forward. "If experience does not matter, then why do people listen to analysts like you?" The crowd erupted in laughter, and at that moment, everyone knew Rodgers was not done yet. The room erupted in laughter, and for the first time, Jason Miller did not have a comeback. Aaron Rodgers let the moment settle before continuing. "Think about it, Jason. Analysts like you make a living talking about athletes, players who've been there, done that. If experience does not matter, why do people listen to you?" Miller shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "That is different," he muttered. Rodgers smirked. "Is it? Because last I checked, wisdom and experience never expire. Whether you are playing football, leading a team, or standing on this stage, what you have learned along the way still holds value." The audience murmured in agreement. Rodgers took a step forward. "You see, Jason, people love to say someone is too old when they want a shortcut to dismiss them. But age is not a weakness, it is a weapon. The longer you have been in the game, the more you have seen, the more you have adapted. That is why I am still here. And that is why you are still listening." Miller cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "I was just saying—" Rodgers held up a hand. "Let me guess you were just saying that I should retire? Maybe, but let me ask you this. What happens if I am not done winning yet?" The room erupted again. Jason Miller had walked into this thinking he would expose Aaron Rodgers. But now, it was him who was struggling to keep up. Jason Miller shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had come into this expecting to embarrass Aaron Rodgers, but now he was the one on the defensive. Rodgers let the moment sink in before continuing. "You see, Jason, people love to say too old because it is easier than admitting they were wrong." Miller scoffed. "Come on, Aaron. You cannot ignore reality. Athletes decline. It is a fact." Rodgers nodded. "You are right. Physical abilities change. But let me ask you something. What matters more in pressure situations? Strength, speed, or decision-making? Leadership, and the ability to handle adversity?" Miller hesitated. "Well," Rodgers smirked, "because last I checked, the best quarterbacks are not just the fastest or strongest. They are the ones who stay calm when the pressure is at its highest." The audience murmured in agreement. Rodgers continued. "Experience teaches you something that raw talent never can. How to win when everything is against you. I have been in countless games where the odds were stacked against me. And guess what? I still came out on top." Miller clenched his jaw. "That does not change the fact that younger players are taking over." Rodgers chuckled. "Sure, there will always be younger talent, but let me ask you one last thing. If I was really done, why are we still talking about me?" The room erupted in applause. Jason Miller had no answer. Because Rodgers had just shut him down completely. Jason Miller sat there, speechless. The audience was hanging on Rodgers' every word, and he knew it. Rodgers let the applause settle before leaning forward slightly. Jason, you keep talking about age like it is a countdown to irrelevance. But let me remind you of something: greatness is not defined by a number. Miller forced a chuckle, trying to regain control. All right, Aaron, then tell me this: do you seriously believe you can still compete at the highest level? Rodgers smirked. Jason, let me put it this way. The moment I believe I cannot, I will walk away on my own terms, not because some analyst tells me to. The audience murmured in agreement. Rodgers continued, You see, guys like you love to predict the downfall of players like me. You look at a stat sheet and think you can measure heart, leadership, and experience. But the truth is, you cannot. That is why you talk about the game and I play it. Miller's face turned red. So you are saying you are not declining at all? Rodgers chuckled. I am saying that decline is a mindset, and I do not have one. The crowd erupted again. Jason Miller had started this battle. But now, he was the one losing. Jason Miller's frustration was starting to show. He had expected Aaron Rodgers to stumble, maybe even laugh off the comment and move on. But instead, Rodgers had turned the entire conversation against him. Miller shook his head. Look, Aaron, I get it. You are competitive. You do not want to admit that time catches up to everyone. But the reality is, young talent is taking over. Do you really think you can keep up with them? Rodgers smirked. You know, Jason, that is funny, because I have seen plenty of young talent come and go. Some lasted a season, some lasted a few years. But the great ones, they last. The audience nodded in agreement. Rodgers continued. You know what separates veterans from young players? We do not panic. We do not break under pressure. When the game is on the line, when the moment is too big for some young star, that is when guys like me take over. Miller scoffed. So you are saying young players cannot handle pressure? Rodgers shook his head. I am saying I know how to handle it better. The crowd erupted in applause again. Miller had no response, because deep down, he knew Rodgers was right. Jason Miller sat back in his chair, clearly frustrated. Every attempt he had made to challenge Aaron Rodgers had been turned against him. The crowd was no longer on his side, but he was not ready to back down just yet. All right, Aaron, Miller said, forcing a smirk. You talk a big game, but facts are facts. Your stats are not what they used to. Your speed is not what it used to. You are telling me none of that matters? Rodgers nodded. You are right, Jason. My speed is not what it was at 25. My arm strength may not be at its absolute peak. But you know what? That does not mean I am done. Miller scoffed. Then what does it mean? Rodgers smiled. It means I have had to adapt. And adaptation is what separates the good from the great. The audience erupted in applause. Rodgers continued, Football, like life, is not just about physical ability. It is about awareness, decision-making, and the ability to rise in pressure situations. And last time I checked, that does not decline with age. It gets better. Miller leaned forward. So, you are saying that as long as you can still outthink your opponents, you can keep playing? Rodgers smirked. That is exactly what I am saying. Miller tried one last time. But eventually, every player's time runs out. Rodgers nodded. Of course, but here is the thing: only I decide time comes. Not the media, not the critics, and definitely not you. The crowd erupted again. Rodgers leaned in, looking Miller directly in the eyes. Tell me, Jason, how long have you been an analyst? Miller hesitated. 15 years. Rodgers grinned. 15 years, huh? Interesting. So, using your logic, are you too old to be doing this job? The room fell silent. Miller opened his mouth, but no words came out. Rodgers continued. Because if time automatically makes someone worse, then maybe you should step aside for a younger analyst, right? Miller's face turned red. That is different. Rodgers chuckled. Is it? The audience burst into laughter. Rodgers leaned back and crossed his arms. Experience is only a weakness if you let it be. Otherwise, it is the most powerful tool you have. Miller looked down, completely out of arguments. Rodgers smiled. Let me make it simple. I am still here because I earned it. And when I decide to leave, it will not be because of some analyst's opinion. The crowd stood up, giving Rodgers a standing ovation. Miller had walked into this thinking he would expose Rodgers, but now he was the one who had been shut down. Jason Miller sat in silence, his face tense. The entire room had turned against him. He had come in expecting to embarrass Aaron Rodgers, but instead, he had been the one exposed. Rodgers let the applause settle before speaking again. You see, Jason, people love to focus on decline, but they forget to talk about evolution. The game changes, and the best players find a way to keep up. Miller cleared his throat. So you are saying you are just as good as you were 10 years ago? Rodgers smirked. I am saying I am smarter, more efficient, and more prepared than I was 10 years ago. Would you bet against that? The audience laughed, and Miller hesitated before responding. But there comes a time when experience is not enough. The body slows down, the game gets younger. Eventually, that catches up to everyone. Rodgers nodded. Of course. And when that day comes, I will know. But today is not that day. Miller scoffed. You really think you can still compete with the best? Rodgers chuckled. Jason, if I was not competing with the best, you would not still be talking about me. The crowd erupted again. Miller exhaled, knowing he had lost control. All right, I will give you credit. You know how to handle criticism, but one day you will have to face reality. Rodgers leaned forward. Let me tell you something, Jason. Reality is not decided by people in suits sitting at a desk. Reality is made on the field, under pressure, when everything is on the line, and I still live for those moments. The audience rose to their feet, giving Rodgers a standing ovation. Miller had nothing left to say, because Rodgers had just proved his point without a doubt. The audience continued to cheer as Aaron Rodgers stood tall, having completely turned the conversation in his favor. Jason Miller, once confident in his criticism, now sat silently, out of arguments, out of comebacks. Rodgers smiled and picked up the microphone one last time. The truth is, people will always have something to say. First, they doubt you. Then, they say you are past your prime. But the only thing that really matters is, do you still have the drive to prove them wrong? The crowd roared in agreement. Miller sighed, finally conceding. All right, Aaron, you win this round. Rodgers smirked. Jason, I have been winning for a long time. The audience erupted in laughter as Rodgers shook Miller's hand. There was no more debate. Rodgers had made his point loud and clear. This moment was about more than just football. It was about proving that experience, determination, and mindset matter more than age. No matter what field you are in, people will try to tell you that your time is up. But the real question is, are you willing to prove them wrong? Because in the end, the only person who decides when you are done is you.